The music hall was filled with the soft murmur of an eager crowd, waiting for the evening's performance. Velvet curtains framed the grand stage, and the warm lights highlighted the polished wood of the magnificent piano. People were dressed in their finest, the kind of audience that expected perfection, and tonight, they were about to witness the city's most famous pianist, a man whose talent was only rivaled by his arrogance. He stepped onto the stage with a confident smile, wearing a tailored black suit that matched his perfectly groomed hair. Every eye turned to him, and he soaked in the admiration with a small, proud nod. As he approached the piano, he did not just sit. He seemed to own the instrument, as if it were an extension of himself. The audience applauded politely, some even cheering, but beneath the surface, a few murmurs carried a hint of skepticism. Not everyone admired him for his attitude. The pianist's fingers hovered over the keys for a moment, and then he began. Notes poured out quickly, perfectly measured and precise. His skill was undeniable. The fast scales, complicated arpeggios, and dramatic flourishes were breathtaking. Some people leaned forward, eyes wide in amazement, while others clutched their programs, trying to keep up with the speed. Yet, while the performance was flawless, it had a sense of emptiness. It was technical brilliance, but it lacked heart. It was music as a show, not music as emotion. In the audience, among the sea of formal attire and glittering jewelry, sat a simple woman. She was dressed plainly, a modest dress and simple shoes, carrying herself with quiet dignity. She had come from a small town, traveling many hours just to hear this famous pianist play. She loved music deeply, but she was not here to show off. She simply wanted to listen, to feel something real in the notes that filled the hall. The pianist noticed her almost immediately. Perhaps it was her plain appearance, the calm way she sat without fanning herself or drawing attention, that caught his eye. He smirked to himself, a slight tilt of his head, as if he had already made a decision about her. To him, she looked like someone who would never understand music, someone unworthy of the stage. That thought made him laugh quietly, almost to himself, a sound only he could hear over the piano's lingering notes. As the final chord echoed through the hall and the audience applauded, the pianist stood and bowed, his expression proud. He scanned the crowd, and then, with a mischievous glint in his eyes, he addressed them. His voice was smooth, confident, with a tone that carried both challenge and amusement. It is easy to play music when you are trained, when every note is practiced and perfected, he said, pausing for effect. But what about those who think they can play, yet have never experienced true music? He looked directly at the simple woman in the audience. Perhaps we should see if talent is truly born, or if it can be faked. The hall fell silent, every ear straining to hear what he would say next. People exchanged confused glances. Some were shocked by his boldness, while others leaned forward, intrigued by what seemed like a sudden challenge. "I invite this lady to come forward," the pianist said, pointing lightly in her direction. "Let us have a little duel. If she can play as I do, then I will gladly admit that skill knows no appearance. But if she cannot, we will know that true mastery cannot be taught or imagined by the untrained." There was a pause. A hush fell over the audience. The woman looked up, calm and composed. She was not intimidated by his words. She had practiced for years, even if no one in her small town had recognized her talent. She understood music not just as notes and speed, but as feeling, as life expressed in sound. She stood slowly, walking to the stage with a steady pace, each step confident despite the whispers around her. The audience watched in quiet anticipation. Some were skeptical, some curious, and a few were already forming opinions based on the pianist's smirk and her humble appearance. The contrast was stark. Here was the celebrated master, full of flair and pride, and there she was, plain, quiet, carrying nothing but her love for music. The stage seemed almost too large for her, yet she moved across it as if it were a familiar space, her presence calm but undeniable. The pianist glanced at her and let out a soft laugh, shaking his head slightly. "Very well," he said, his voice carrying a mixture of amusement and confidence. Let us see if your music can speak where words fail." He gestured toward the piano with a flourish, inviting her to sit. The audience leaned forward, anticipation hanging thick in the air. She sat at the piano with a gentle grace. Unlike him, she did not strike a dramatic pose, nor did she demand attention. Her hands rested lightly on the keys, and she closed her eyes for a moment, as if listening not to the room, but to something deep inside herself. The audience felt the change in energy. There was no arrogance here, only focus, only respect for the music she was about to create. The pianist's fingers twitched impatiently, ready to begin. He expected her to falter, to play something clumsy or uninspired. He wanted to see her fail, to prove his point in front of the crowd. But there was something in her calm demeanor that gave him a strange pause. Perhaps it was confidence, or perhaps it was the quiet certainty of someone who knew they were about to do something extraordinary. The woman pressed her fingers to the keys, not with force, but with intention. The first notes were soft, almost timid, barely filling the hall. Some in the audience shifted uncomfortably, unsure of what to make of it. But slowly, the music began to grow, not in speed or technical display, but in emotion. Each note carried meaning, weaving a story that touched the hearts of everyone listening. It was not about impressing or showing skill, it was about communicating something real, something pure. The pianist paused mid-motion, his hands hovering over the keys. He had expected a simple tune, something easy to dismiss. But what he heard was different. It was delicate yet powerful, simple yet profound. The music seemed to come from another world, a place where technique mattered less than soul. The audience was quiet, every person caught in the unexpected beauty of the performance. Whispers died down. There were no phones, no cameras, just ears and hearts fully attentive. He felt a stir of unease, something he had never experienced before. How could someone so plain, so unassuming, produce such music? How could her fingers, moving so effortlessly yet gently over the keys, create something that spoke louder than any dramatic flourish he could muster? A flicker of doubt passed through him, quickly pushed away by his pride. He would not let himself lose. Not yet. The duel had begun, but in a way neither of them expected. The audience, who had anticipated a spectacle of skill and speed, was now witnessing something far more profound. The contrast between arrogance and humility, between showmanship and heartfelt expression. It was not just a challenge. It was a moment that would leave everyone in the hall questioning what true talent really meant. And so, the simple woman continued to play, her music filling the grand hall with warmth and emotion. Each note drew the audience in. Each chord whispered stories of dedication, perseverance, and love for music. She was not trying to defeat the pianist. She was simply being herself, letting her music speak for her. And little did the pianist know, this was just the beginning of a performance that would leave him, and everyone watching, utterly stunned. The audience sat in a tense silence, the hall heavy with anticipation. The simple woman's fingers hovered above the keys for a brief moment, almost as if she were listening to the piano itself, waiting for it to speak to her. The elitist pianist leaned back slightly, confident, smirking as he watched her prepare. In his mind, this would be over quickly. She looked nervous, plain, and inexperienced. He had performed in countless duels, exhibitions, and competitions, and he had never lost. How could this unassuming woman possibly match his skill? She began to play. The first notes were soft and delicate, almost like a whisper in the grand hall. The audience leaned in, curious, trying to catch every subtle sound. At first, some thought the music was too quiet, too simple. They waited for something dramatic, something flashy that could rival the pianist's previous performance. But as the notes continued, they noticed a strange and beautiful quality in her playing. It was not about speed or complexity. It was about emotion. Every key she pressed seemed to carry a story, a feeling that made the listeners pause and breathe along with her. The pianist frowned slightly. He had expected weak, clumsy playing. Instead, the hall was filled with a sound that was precise yet full of warmth. His confidence wavered, though he did not let it show. He tapped his foot impatiently, waiting for her to make a mistake, ready to showcase his superiority once the opportunity came. But mistake after mistake-free mistake, her music flowed naturally, with an elegance that could not be forced or faked. The audience began to shift in their seats, their attention captured by the unexpected brilliance of the woman. Some of them exchanged glances, whispering quietly, unable to hide their surprise. This was not just a simple performance. It was a revelation. The music touched hearts and stirred emotions. Each chord she played seemed to tell a story, and each story felt real and personal. It was a skill that no amount of arrogance or showmanship could replicate. The pianist could feel his fingers twitching, almost as if they itched to compete. He began playing again, faster this time, filling the hall with rapid scales and complicated runs. The audience clapped politely at first, expecting him to overpower her easily. But the woman did not falter. Instead, she continued her own melody, weaving her notes between his, not in a desperate attempt to match speed, but in a graceful, natural flow that created harmony rather than competition. For the first time in his career, the pianist felt something unfamiliar: doubt. His arrogance, his certainty of victory, was slipping away. He could see the admiration in the audience's eyes, the way their attention had shifted entirely to her. She played not to show off but to share a part of herself, and it resonated far more deeply than his technical perfection. He had always believed that mastery was measured in precision, speed, and complexity, but she was showing him a different truth, that music was measured in feeling, in the ability to reach others' hearts. A few audience members had tears in their eyes, moved by the simplicity and purity of her performance. They whispered softly to each other, amazed at how someone so ordinary-looking could produce music so extraordinary. The woman's posture was calm, her expression serene. She did not look at the pianist. She was completely absorbed in the music, as if nothing else existed. The contrast between her quiet focus and his theatrical gestures was stark. Every dramatic flourish he made was overshadowed by the natural elegance of her performance. The pianist tried to keep up, increasing the intensity, striking the keys with force and precision. But the harder he tried, the more it seemed to highlight the difference. His music, though technically perfect, felt empty compared to hers. She was not trying to impress anyone. She was telling a story only she could tell, and it resonated with everyone listening. The audience's applause grew louder, spontaneous, and heartfelt, breaking through the tension like sunlight through clouds. The woman's confidence grew as she felt the audience respond. Her fingers moved over the keys with ease, each note a reflection of her years of practice and her deep love for music. She was not just performing. She was communicating, and the audience understood. Every person in the hall felt connected to the music, caught in a moment that transcended competition. The pianist began to notice it too, the undeniable effect she was having. His smirk faded, replaced by a flicker of disbelief. He had never encountered a musician who could command the room without demanding attention. He paused for a brief moment, letting the final note of a rapid run fade into silence. The woman did not pause. Her melody continued, gentle and flowing, filling the empty spaces with warmth. The audience could barely contain their amazement. They were witnessing something rare, a talent that was not just seen but felt. The energy in the room had shifted entirely. It was no longer a duel in the traditional sense. It was a shared experience of awe and admiration. The pianist's pride struggled against the reality he could not ignore. He had been challenged and he had expected to dominate. Instead, he found himself learning, even if unwillingly. He realized that music was not just about showing off, about proving superiority. It was about expression, about reaching people in ways words could not. And in this simple woman, he saw a mastery that could not be measured by certificates, awards, or public acclaim. As the performance continued, the woman added subtle variations to her music, tiny improvisations that demonstrated both creativity and control. Each variation was delicate yet purposeful, leaving the audience hanging on every note. Some were leaning forward in their seats, completely absorbed. Others had their hands clasped, as if trying to hold onto the moment and not let it pass. The entire hall seemed to breathe with her music, caught in a spell that neither the pianist nor the audience could break. He tried to respond with a sudden, powerful flourish, hoping to reclaim attention. But it felt forced, unnatural. The audience's attention did not waver. They were captivated entirely by the woman's performance. The pianist felt a strange knot of frustration and admiration in his chest. He had been confident, arrogant even, yet here was someone who had taken control of the stage simply by being herself. The simple woman continued to play, her music rising and falling like waves. There was a rhythm to it that felt alive, breathing with emotion. It was not loud or aggressive. It was intimate, personal, and infinitely moving. The audience felt as if they were part of her story, sharing in every high and low, every joy and sorrow. And the pianist, watching her, began to feel the power of humility, of true dedication, and of authentic talent. By the time she reached the end of her piece, the hall was silent for a brief, perfect moment. Everyone was holding their breath, caught in a sense of wonder that seemed almost unreal. Then, as the final note lingered, a wave of applause erupted, more powerful and heartfelt than anything the pianist had ever experienced in his career. Standing, clapping, some even cheering, the audience showed their genuine admiration, not for showmanship, but for pure talent and emotion. The pianist sat frozen, his hands still poised over the keys, a mixture of disbelief and awe in his eyes. For the first time, he understood that music was more than technique. It was about connection, about touching lives, about expressing what could not be said with words. The simple woman had done what he never expected. She had commanded the room without arrogance, without pretense, and without needing to prove herself. And in that moment, he realized that he had underestimated her entirely. The hall was buzzing with an energy that could be felt in every corner. The simple woman's performance had captured everyone's attention, and even those who had doubted her were now leaning forward, mesmerized. Her fingers moved with grace, each note a delicate thread weaving a story that seemed to touch the very hearts of the audience. It was a music that spoke of quiet strength, of endless dedication, and of dreams nurtured in silence. The elitist pianist sat at the edge of his seat, a mixture of pride and shock washing over him. He had never faced a situation like this before. His usual strategy of speed and complexity seemed meaningless against the authenticity of her playing. He tried to remind himself that he was the master here, the one with years of formal training and accolades, but the truth was undeniable. The music coming from her was alive, and it was winning over every ear in the room. She shifted her melody, introducing a subtle variation that flowed effortlessly into a new rhythm. It was gentle yet commanding, inviting the audience to feel the story behind each note. Some listeners closed their eyes, completely absorbed, while others leaned forward, holding their breath with anticipation. Every person in the room felt connected to the music, as if the notes themselves were speaking directly to their hearts. The pianist tried to respond, moving his fingers with precision and force, striking complex chords and rapid sequences. But the room had already changed. The audience's attention had moved from the spectacle of speed to the depth of emotion. No matter how technically perfect his playing was, it could not compete with the raw honesty and passion emanating from the woman at the piano. He felt a tight knot of unease in his chest, a first in his career, as the reality settled in that he might actually be losing. The simple woman's face was calm, almost serene, as if she were unaware of the eyes upon her. Her focus was entirely on the music, letting it flow through her fingers and into the hearts of those listening. She did not rush or force the tempo. Every note was intentional, every pause meaningful. The audience felt it, even if they did not consciously understand why. It was more than music. It was a connection, a bridge between performer and listener, between story and soul. Whispers began to spread through the hall, quiet comments of amazement and disbelief. Some audience members were visibly moved, their expressions softening, eyes glistening. Others simply stared in awe, captivated by the unexpected brilliance unfolding before them. The contrast between her humble appearance and the extraordinary music she created added to the wonder. People were witnessing a moment that felt larger than life, a rare display of talent that could not be taught or bought. The pianist's hands began to shake slightly, a rare loss of composure. He had always been the one to command the stage, to control the audience's attention with flair and technical skill. But now, he was forced to watch as someone else did exactly that, without arrogance or pretension, simply by being genuine and true to her music. The thought was almost unbearable. He realized that this duel was no longer just a contest. It was a lesson, one he hadn't expected to learn. The music continued to rise and fall, soft and powerful, intimate and grand. The woman introduced small embellishments, slight improvisations that showcased her creativity and understanding of the piano. Each variation felt natural, flowing seamlessly into the next. The audience sensed her confidence, her years of quiet dedication, and they responded with silent admiration. It was a performance that demanded attention not through theatrics, but through sheer authenticity. Some members of the crowd whispered to each other, trying to articulate what they were feeling. "It's beautiful," one said softly. "I've never heard anything like this," another whispered. Even those who had attended countless concerts could not deny the uniqueness of the moment. It was as if the music was alive, moving and breathing within the room, and everyone was a part of it. The pianist tried once more to assert his dominance, striking chords with exaggerated gestures, attempting to reclaim the stage. But each effort only seemed to highlight the difference. His playing, though flawless in technique, felt mechanical and distant compared to the woman's expressive and heartfelt performance. She was telling a story, and he was merely demonstrating skill. He felt a pang of humility, a recognition that talent was not just about perfection, but about the ability to touch others through art. The simple woman's melody began to soften, each note lingering in the air like a gentle sigh. The audience followed her every movement, caught in a spell that was both delicate and powerful. She did not look at the pianist. She did not need to. Her music spoke for itself, conveying emotion that transcended words, and it spoke directly to everyone present. The pianist watched, almost unable to comprehend the impact she was having. His pride, so carefully cultivated over years, felt fragile in comparison. As the piece drew to a close, the final notes hung in the air, soft and resonant, leaving the audience in a moment of reverent silence. Then, slowly, applause began, growing louder and louder until the entire hall was filled with it. It was spontaneous, heartfelt, and unrestrained. The woman rose from the piano gracefully, acknowledging the audience with a gentle nod. She did not smile triumphantly. She did not boast. She simply thanked them silently, letting the music speak louder than words ever could. The pianist remained seated, stunned, unable to immediately respond. For the first time, he felt the weight of regret, a deep and undeniable awareness that he had underestimated someone purely based on appearance. He had assumed that only his fame, skill, and experience mattered, but he was now painfully aware that true talent could be quiet, humble, and profoundly moving. He felt a strange mix of admiration and self-reproach, knowing that this moment would stay with him forever. The audience continued to cheer, their excitement mixed with awe. They had witnessed something extraordinary, something that challenged their assumptions about music, talent, and appearance. The simple woman had taken a stage that was not meant for her, at least in the eyes of the world, and had transformed it into a space of genuine artistry. Her performance was a testament to the power of dedication, humility, and the ability to connect with others through expression. As she stepped back from the piano, people were still murmuring in admiration. Some approached the stage, trying to glimpse her face, to understand the person behind such astonishing talent. She walked quietly, with a poise that seemed natural, her demeanor calm despite the intensity of the moment. She did not seek attention. She did not crave recognition. She had played for the music itself, and that authenticity had captured everyone's hearts. The pianist finally stood, approaching her with a hesitant step. He extended a hand, a gesture of acknowledgement and respect. There was no arrogance in his eyes now, only a deep recognition of her talent. The audience watched in silence, sensing the significance of this small act. It was not just a duel. It was a turning point, a lesson in humility and respect. The woman accepted his hand with a gentle smile, and for a brief moment, the hall seemed to hold its breath. This simple act of acknowledgement bridged the gap between two worlds. The world of fame, prestige, and arrogance, and the world of quiet dedication, humility, and authentic talent. It was a moment that everyone present would remember for a lifetime. As they both stepped back, the audience erupted into applause once more. This time louder, more celebratory. They had witnessed not just a musical performance, but a human story of challenge, recognition, and the triumph of true talent. The simple woman had not only held her own against the elitist pianist. She had transformed the entire hall with her music, leaving an indelible mark on everyone who had been present. The pianist watched her walk off the stage, a deep sense of respect settling over him. He had learned something invaluable. Talent and emotion could outshine fame and technical skill. The audience continued to buzz with excitement, sharing their impressions and replaying the moment in their minds. For them, it was more than a concert. It was an experience, a reminder of the power of music to connect, inspire, and move hearts in ways nothing else could. And in that moment, the simple woman had become unforgettable. The hall was still vibrating with the echoes of the woman's music. Even after she had stepped away from the piano, the audience remained seated, captivated, as if the room itself refused to return to ordinary life. The performance had left a mark on everyone present. Conversations were hushed, murmurs of astonishment passing from one person to the next. They had expected entertainment, perhaps a spectacle, but what they experienced was far more profound. The elitist pianist stood at the side of the stage, silent. His usual confidence had evaporated, replaced with something he had rarely felt: humility. He was a man used to control, used to commanding every gaze. Yet now he found himself observing someone else's power, a power born not from training or fame, but from heart and authenticity. The applause of the audience, the intensity of their emotions, it all felt like a mirror reflecting the truth he had refused to see. He thought back to his own performances, recalling the countless times he had relied on technique to dazzle and impress. He had always believed that speed and complexity were the ultimate measures of mastery. But now, standing next to this woman, he realized how shallow that belief had been. Talent, he finally understood, was not only about skill. It was about connection, about touching souls in ways that could not be calculated or forced. The woman, noticing his gaze, offered a quiet nod. There was no arrogance, no hint of triumph in her expression. She had played not to win, not to prove anyone wrong, but simply because she loved music and wanted to share that love with those willing to listen. It was this authenticity that had moved the audience, that had shaken the pianist to his core. She had shown that music was more than performance. It was storytelling. It was life expressed through sound. As the pianist reflected on this, he felt a stirring in himself. It was a mix of admiration, regret, and inspiration. He wanted to understand how someone so humble could command such respect and attention. He realized that he had underestimated her, not because of her skill, but because of his own biases. He had judged her by appearances, assuming that her quiet demeanor and simple clothing meant mediocrity. The truth was far different, and the lesson was humbling. The audience, still buzzing with emotion, began to rise slowly to their feet. Some clapped, others cheered, and many simply stared in awe. Their response was different from the usual polite applause the pianist was accustomed to. This was raw, heartfelt, and genuine. They were not celebrating showmanship. They were celebrating truth, authenticity, and the courage to express oneself fully. The woman turned back to the piano for a moment, her fingers brushing lightly over the keys, as if to say goodbye to the instrument that had allowed her to speak her heart. The sound was soft, almost imperceptible, yet it drew the room together once more. There was a sense of closure, a gentle reminder that the music had been about more than competition. It had been about connection. The pianist found himself stepping forward, almost instinctively. He extended a hand, a gesture of acknowledgement and respect. It was a moment of humility, a rare admission that he had been bested, not by technical skill alone, but by heart and dedication. The woman accepted his gesture with a soft smile, and in that simple exchange, a bridge was formed between them. It was a quiet but powerful moment, witnessed by everyone in the hall, a reminder that respect could be earned through more than just fame and recognition. The audience continued to applaud, their excitement mixing with awe. They had been a part of something extraordinary, a moment that would linger in their memories for years to come. The woman's story, her journey from quiet practice in a small town to commanding the attention of an entire hall, resonated deeply. It was a testament to the power of persistence, humility, and the courage to embrace one's own abilities without fear of judgment. As the applause slowly settled, conversations began to rise again, but with a new tone. People were discussing not only the performance but the message behind it. They spoke of the importance of recognizing talent where it is found, of valuing heart as much as skill, and of the humility required to truly appreciate others. It was a conversation that went beyond music, touching on life and the way people often misjudge others based on appearances or social expectations. The pianist, still standing near the stage, watched the audience with a mixture of pride and reflection. He had learned a valuable lesson, one that would stay with him for the rest of his life. He had faced someone who challenged not only his fingers on the keys but also his understanding of what it meant to be a true musician. It was a challenge he had not anticipated, and one that had reshaped his perspective completely. The woman, sensing that her role in this evening was complete, began to move toward the exit. Her steps were calm, her demeanor composed, but there was a quiet sense of triumph in the way she carried herself. She had not sought glory, but in the act of sharing her music honestly and openly, she had achieved something far greater than she had ever imagined. The audience recognized this, their applause following her as she left the stage, a sign of respect and admiration that needed no words. The pianist took a deep breath, feeling a mix of humility and inspiration. He knew that he would never forget this night, the lesson it had brought him, and the extraordinary talent he had witnessed. It was a reminder that greatness often comes from unexpected places, and that true mastery is measured not only by technical skill but by the ability to connect with others, to inspire, and to move hearts. The hall slowly emptied, but the energy lingered, a sense of something profound having occurred. People spoke in low tones, reflecting on the performance, on the courage of the woman, and on the transformation they had witnessed in the pianist himself. It was more than a musical duel. It was a story of recognition, respect, and the enduring power of authenticity. In the quiet moments after the audience had left, the pianist sat alone at the grand piano, reflecting on the evening. He let his fingers rest lightly on the keys, thinking about the woman's approach, her dedication, and her ability to move people through sincerity. He realized that this encounter would change the way he approached his own music, the way he performed, and even the way he viewed others. It was a lesson in humility and humanity, a reminder that talent is not always loud or flashy, but sometimes quiet, steadfast, and profoundly moving. As he finally stood and walked away from the stage, he carried with him a newfound respect for those who dedicate themselves to their craft with honesty and heart. He knew that the memory of this evening, of the simple woman who had captured the hearts of all, would remain with him forever. And in that knowledge he found not bitterness or regret, but gratitude for having witnessed something truly remarkable. The crowd's applause had not yet faded when the woman returned briefly to the stage, this time to acknowledge the pianist. There was a soft, quiet dignity in her steps, a calmness that contrasted with the excitement that still pulsed through the hall. People watched her intently, aware that this was more than a simple gesture. It was a moment of recognition, a silent statement of equality, and a demonstration of the power of humility in a world often dominated by pride. The pianist, still standing near the piano, felt a strange warmth in his chest. He had been taught to measure skill by public recognition and technical prowess, but he realized that he had missed something essential all along. True mastery was not about showing off or winning applause. It was about connecting with others, about creating an experience that went beyond notes on a page. The woman had done exactly that. She had touched hearts, inspired awe, and, in doing so, reminded him of the true purpose of music. He took a careful step forward, his pride softened by the lessons of the evening. He extended his hand toward her, not as a challenge, not as a performance, but as an acknowledgement of her talent and dedication. The audience watched, holding their breath, sensing the significance of this simple act. When she accepted his hand with a gentle smile, there was a moment of shared understanding between them, a quiet exchange that spoke louder than any music could. People around the hall began to whisper, not just about the performance but about the transformation they had witnessed in the pianist. He was no longer the arrogant, untouchable figure who had entered the hall. He had learned something profound, something that could not be taught in a classroom or measured by awards. He had learned that talent was multifaceted, that humility could be just as powerful as confidence, and that recognition was most meaningful when it was earned through respect and genuine skill. The woman returned to her seat, and the pianist finally took a step back, a deep breath releasing tension he hadn't realized he was holding. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of clarity about what it meant to perform. Music was not about showing who was better or faster. It was about touching souls, creating moments that people would remember for the rest of their lives. He had seen that tonight and he could not unsee it. The audience remained in a state of quiet reverence for a few more minutes, then slowly began to rise. Some were clapping, others were nodding in silent appreciation, and many had tears in their eyes. It was a mixture of emotions, a combination of awe, respect, and gratitude for the rare beauty they had witnessed. The simple woman had captured the attention and admiration of everyone present, not through showmanship, but through her dedication, her heart, and her willingness to share her gift openly. Conversations began to ripple through the hall as people left, all centered around what they had just experienced. They spoke of the unexpected talent of the woman, the humility she displayed, and the lesson it had given even the most accomplished pianist in the room. Some remarked on how they had been quick to judge her by her appearance, only to be proven spectacularly wrong. Others reflected on the broader meaning of the evening, realizing that the performance was a reminder of the value of authenticity and passion in every aspect of life. The pianist lingered near the piano, reflecting quietly on what had happened. He ran his fingers over the keys, not in performance, but in contemplation. Every note seemed to remind him of the woman's music, the way it had carried emotion, grace, and power without needing to be loud or flashy. He realized that he had been chasing applause and recognition for too long, often forgetting the true purpose of his craft. Tonight had reminded him, in the most undeniable way, of why he had fallen in love with music in the first place. The woman approached the stage once more, this time to collect her sheet music and personal items. She moved gracefully, her presence calm yet commanding in its quiet confidence. The audience watched, sensing that her story was not just about a duel or a performance but about a larger message. That talent and dedication, even when unassuming, can overcome prejudice and expectation. She had proven that music was a universal language, one that could transcend appearance, background, and social status. The pianist watched her carefully, his earlier arrogance replaced by genuine respect. He understood that he had been humbled, not defeated in the conventional sense, but enlightened. He had witnessed a rare gift, one that challenged his assumptions and reminded him that true artistry is measured by impact, not spectacle. In that moment, he vowed to approach his future performances with a renewed sense of purpose, inspired by the authenticity he had seen in her. As the woman left the stage, the pianist stood alone, letting the silence of the hall settle around him. The energy of the audience had not dissipated. It lingered, a testament to the resonance of her performance. He thought about the years he had spent focusing on speed, precision, and recognition, and realized that there was a new path forward, one where heart and connection mattered as much as skill. He smiled quietly to himself, a sense of peace washing over him. For the first time, he felt that he had truly understood the essence of music. People began to exit the hall, their conversations filled with wonder, amazement, and a sense of having witnessed something extraordinary. They spoke not just about the duel or the performance, but about the deeper lessons of humility, respect, and the unexpected power of genuine talent. The simple woman had become more than a performer. She had become an example, a symbol of dedication and authenticity that resonated with every person who had been present. The pianist lingered, playing a few quiet notes to himself, thinking about how he could incorporate what he had learned into his own life and performances. The room, once filled with the tension of competition, was now infused with the warmth of understanding, reflection, and the acknowledgement of greatness that comes from heart and soul, rather than only from skill and showmanship. He felt a shift within himself, a new awareness of what it meant to truly connect with music and the people who listened to it. As the hall emptied completely, the pianist finally stepped away from the stage, carrying with him a profound sense of respect and admiration for the woman who had changed the course of the evening. Her music had left an indelible impression, not only on the audience but on him as well. He knew that the memory of this night would stay with him forever, a constant reminder of the power of authenticity, dedication, and the human heart expressed through music. And in that realization, he found not defeat, but inspiration, knowing that the lesson he had learned would shape every performance from that day forward. The night had grown quiet, and the hall, though emptied of most of its audience, still held the memory of what had happened. The simple woman had left the stage, but her music lingered in the minds and hearts of everyone who had been present. The air seemed charged with the realization that something extraordinary had just occurred, something that transcended talent, pride, or expectation. It was a moment that would remain in memory for a lifetime. The elitist pianist remained behind, standing alone by the piano. He ran his fingers lightly over the keys, not to perform, but to reflect. Each note brought memories of the evening's duel, of the woman's calm confidence, her grace, and the depth of emotion in her playing. He realized that all the accolades, awards, and recognition he had collected over the years could not compare to the effect she had achieved. She had reached people in a way he had never truly understood, a connection that went beyond applause or fame. He thought about his own journey, the countless hours he had spent perfecting technique, the competitions he had won, the standing ovations he had received. And yet, tonight had taught him that technical mastery alone was not enough. Music was not about proving superiority or demonstrating speed. It was about expression, about touching hearts, and creating a shared experience. She had reminded him, in a single performance, of the purpose and beauty of art itself. Outside, the city had begun to quiet down, but word of the performance spread quickly. People who had attended were talking to friends and family, sharing the story of the humble woman who had stunned an entire hall and even left a celebrated pianist in awe. Social media buzzed with excitement as people recounted the emotions they had felt, the beauty of the performance, and the lesson it had imparted. The woman's name began to circulate, though she herself had never sought fame. It was her music, her authenticity, and her courage that made her unforgettable. The pianist felt a strange mix of emotions. He was humbled, yes, but he was also inspired. He realized that the encounter had changed him, that his approach to music and to life would never be the same. Pride and arrogance had no place when true talent could emerge quietly and unexpectedly. He had learned that respect and admiration were earned not through showmanship, but through dedication, humility, and the ability to connect with others on a deeper level. He began to play softly, letting the piano respond to his reflections. The notes were gentle and thoughtful, less about speed and more about feeling. He imagined the woman's approach, her calm hands and the way she allowed each note to speak. He tried to capture even a fraction of the authenticity she had displayed. And though he could never replicate her exact performance, he realized that the lesson was not about imitation. It was about understanding the heart of music itself. Meanwhile, the woman had returned to her small town, carrying no trophies, no formal recognition, just the satisfaction of having shared her gift. She continued her daily life, teaching young children, playing quietly for herself, and practicing with the same dedication she had always maintained. Yet she noticed a change. People spoke of her with respect. Strangers would smile when they recognized her, and invitations to perform began to appear. Despite all this, she remained humble, never allowing recognition to cloud the joy she found in music itself. The city, too, was changed. The story of the duel became a symbol of the power of talent combined with humility. It reminded people not to judge based on appearance, to recognize potential where it might not be obvious, and to value authenticity over showmanship. Musicians and audiences alike spoke of the event as a turning point, a lesson that reminded everyone why they loved music and art in the first place. Back in the hall, the pianist often found himself reflecting on that night. He would close his eyes and remember the clarity in her gaze, the calmness of her posture, the way every note seemed to carry meaning beyond technique. He would think of the audience's reactions, the hush that had fallen, and the overwhelming applause that followed her final notes. These memories became a source of inspiration, guiding him in future performances and reminding him to approach his craft with heart as well as skill. He began to perform differently, with a new understanding of music's purpose. He focused on expression, on connection, and on conveying emotion rather than simply impressing with technical ability. Audiences noticed the difference immediately. There was warmth, sincerity, and humanity in his playing that had not been there before. While his skill remained exceptional, it was now matched with a sense of empathy and awareness that drew listeners in a way he had never achieved alone. The woman's influence extended beyond music. She became a quiet role model, showing that success was not always about accolades or public recognition, but about persistence, dedication, and staying true to oneself. Her story inspired other musicians, especially those from humble backgrounds, to pursue their passions without fear of judgment or dismissal. It reminded them that talent can emerge anywhere, and that authenticity and hard work are often the greatest measures of success. Time passed, but the memory of that duel remained vivid for both the pianist and the woman. For him, it was a turning point, a lesson in humility and the power of genuine talent. For her, it was a moment of quiet triumph, a recognition that her dedication and love for music had touched countless lives. And for the audience, it was an unforgettable experience, one that reminded them of the magic that can happen when heart and skill meet on a stage. Eventually, the pianist and the woman would meet again in different contexts: concerts, teaching events, and informal gatherings. Each encounter carried the memory of that first duel, a mutual respect grounded in the understanding of what it truly means to be an artist. They shared no rivalry, no need to compete, only the quiet acknowledgement that each had learned something valuable from the other. The city continued to celebrate music, inspired by that evening's event. New performers emerged, encouraged by the story of the humble woman who had dared to play against the city's most celebrated pianist. Audiences became more attentive, more appreciative, and more willing to embrace authenticity over spectacle. Music schools began to emphasize emotional expression alongside technical skill, and musicians of all levels found encouragement in the idea that talent could shine from anywhere, given dedication and heart. Years later, the duel was still talked about, a story shared in music halls, classrooms, and homes. It had become a legend not because of drama or conflict, but because of the timeless lessons it imparted: humility, respect, authenticity, and the transformative power of art. The woman's name became synonymous with quiet excellence and inspiration, and the pianist was remembered not just for his skill, but for the humility he had gained and the lessons he had carried forward. The evening had begun as a challenge, a duel, a test of skill and pride. Yet it ended as a celebration of humanity, creativity, and connection. Both the pianist and the woman left a lasting impression, not through victory or defeat, but through the truth of their music and the authenticity of their hearts. And in the hearts of everyone who had been present, the memory of that night continued to inspire, reminding them that true greatness is often quiet, humble, and profoundly moving.